Alright, we've already established that the Industrial Revolution was a major force of change in the world. But for a lot of people, that change was for the worse. So in this video, we need to talk about all the reforms in the 19th century that attempted to make those people's lives a little less nasty. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, let's get to it. So in response to the social woes created by industrialization, some Europeans turned to politics and political parties to create meaningful reform and to make their lives feel more fulfilling and less like a recently expired coupon. And that brings us to the rise of mass-based political parties. Now, political parties weren't necessarily new at this point, but what was new was mass-based political parties. You see, as European nations extended the right to vote to more and more people, political parties had to appeal to more voters' interests in order to win office. For example, in England, the Conservative Party really only cared about the interests of the landed elite. But the Liberal Party increasingly represented the interests of the working class. And so as more and more of the working class gained the right to vote, the Liberal Party grew in influence and power. And in the 19th century, the people of England turned to the Liberal Party to enact policies for a national education system and public health benefits. Another example of people attempting reform through political parties was Germany's Social Democratic Party. This party was built on Marxist principles of class struggle and worked to improve the lives of the German working class. Now, remember what we talked about in another video when we dealt with Marx's understanding of history. He believed that class struggle would eventually result in a violent revolution. And there were Germans in the Social Democratic Party who believed revolution was inevitable. But there was another faction that believed that class struggle could be alleviated by social reform, and they were able to make some modest gains for the working class, not least improve standards of living and working. Now, during this time, workers also joined together in labor unions, which promoted social and economic reforms, and some of these even turned into political parties themselves. And this was especially prominent in England. After 1870, labor unions gained the right to strike, and when they gained the right to strike, well, yeah, they struck. In 1888, female workers organized a strike in the match industry, and in 1889, London dock workers did the same. By the time World War I rolled around, somewhere around 3 to 4 million workers had organized themselves into labor unions in England, and this became one of the primary ways that workers agitated for reforms to their wages and their working conditions. Now, in the previous point, we talked about the Social Democratic Party in Germany, but before this was a political party, it was two independent labor unions, namely the General German Workers Association and the Social Democratic Workers Party. Now, it's not as important to remember the names of those individual unions as it is to remember that these labor unions merged to form a political party that worked for the rights of the working class. Now, women also pressed for legal, economic, and political rights as well as improved working conditions. This came about in part because women of this age were exceedingly involved in broader reform movements that gave them the motivation to begin questioning their own roles in society. For example, Barbara Smith Bowditch in England gathered a group of women together who became known as the Ladies of Langdon Place. They worked together to extend voting rights to women and to recognize women's rights to property apart from their husbands. And we talked about Flora Tristan in another video, but by way of reminder, she worked for women's equality in France. And since she was a utopian socialist, her ideas didn't really seem workable in the real world, and thus her ideas remained confined to the margins of society. But building on Tristan's work, the Women's Social Political Union emerged in Britain in the early 20th century. It was created by the Pankhurst family, who organized rallies for women's equality. The most significant rally for women's suffrage occurred in 1908 in London's Hyde Park. In response, police attacked the demonstrators and jailed no small number of them. But the Pankhurst continued fighting for women's suffrage, a fight that eventually pressured Britain's Liberal Party to add that issue to their platform. And as a result, in 1918, the British Parliament passed a law enabling men over 21 to vote and women over the age of 30 to vote, so yeah, baby steps. Additionally, let's talk about people who sought to reform society based on their religious principles. One of the most notable was the Sunday school movement, which aimed to provide education for working class children, and most of the teaching was done by women. The movement was a massive success, and as adults brought their children to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, the adults themselves learned too, all leading to a more literate and empowered society. Additionally, the abolitionist movement sought to ban slavery. This movement had the most success in England, where, growing out of the abolitionist work of William Wilberforce, by 1838, slavery was abolished across the British Empire. Okay, click here to keep reviewing for Unit 6 of AP European History. And click here to get my AP Euro review pack if you need help getting an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.